Having completed the draping of the front, we're ready to approach the back. In preparation for draping the back, I'm going to put a row of pins about 1.5 inches away from the tight body line. The reason for that is that I want to turn the muslin back from the tight body line and expose the side seam of the form, still maintaining the balance and correct fit of the front. The draping of the back will begin with the center back panel, and we prepared the muslin for that the last time when we began the front. There are 2 panels for the back, one for the center back and one for the side back. The center back panel will be creased along the center back grain line, as for the front, creasing it firmly but gently with your fingernail. This fold back should never be ironed, but should only be creased by hand. Pressing it with an iron will cause the muslin to go off grain. We'll begin with something we can identify on the muslin and a place we can identify on the form. In this case, it is the neckline center back intersection. We'll pin the neckline in place, pin at the shoulder blade level, and smooth down to the waist, leaving a very easy fit. This should not pull tight to the body, but should just sit flat and comfortably with ever so little bit of ease going up and down the back. A pin halfway between the shoulder blade and the waistline helps to secure the muslin. It is important, as with the basic waist, to establish the cross grain line once the lengthwise grain has been established. The cross grain line is at the shoulder blade level, and I will smooth it across and pin it so that it is perfectly square with center back and parallel with the flat surfaces in the room. A gentle fit, not too tight, just fitting well. Secure the line and put a pin in to hold it in place halfway between the center back and the princess line. We can then move on to the neckline. We'll crease the neckline and then treat it very much the same way we did the front. It will be slashed 1 inch up from the neckline seam for 1 inch and then straight up, removing the rectangular piece of fabric. That will release the muslin sufficiently so that you can get a better sense of how it will fit to the neckline. It will be slashed on the diagonal into the corner, same as for the front, another slash 1 inch away, and another one 1 inch away from that. The back neckline is less curved than the front neckline and needs less slashing, but does need some. Secured at the shoulder neckline intersection, and then we are ready to look at the shoulder. The shoulder seam for the back, as with the basic waists, will require a pinch of ease halfway between the neckline and the princess line. That pinch of ease is very small. It is as fat as a pin, and it is picked up straddling the front shoulder seam. And you should be able to see your front shoulder seam through the muslin so that you can secure it well. That pinch of ease is important and should not be ignored. We'll then move to the waistline area. Again, it probably will be necessary to slash the muslin to within about 1/4 inch of the waistline in the princess line area, and to pin it at the princess line, and probably another slash will help to make it lay nice and flat against the figure. The rest of the muslin beyond the princess line should be secured so that it doesn't shift in the marking of the muslin. Just hold it down gently, and at this point the muslin is ready to be marked. We'll begin the marking at the neckline, making that crease very, very clear, and the cross mark at the center back is already in. The neckline will be dotted every 1/2 inch until you come to the neckline shoulder intersection where we will cross mark. Now the back shoulder, as you've learned before, is different from the front shoulder in that it does have a shape, it's not a straight line, and it will need to be dotted. Following the front shoulder line, dot the shoulder line up to the princess line shoulder seam intersection and place a cross mark. We'll dot the princess line all the way down. At the shoulder blade level, we'll place a cross mark and continue dotting all the way down to the bottom of the muslin. Every 1/2 inch. At the waistline, we'll place a cross mark. And because the back waistline may or may not be perfectly straight from center back to princess line, depending upon how shapely the figure is, we'll place 1 dot in the center between center back and princess line. That's the marking for the center back panel. After it's marked, it will be removed from the figure for truing. We'll remove all of the holding pins and place the muslin flat on the table. The pinch of ease pin may stay in at this point. Okay, we'll begin with the center back neckline. The center back neckline is different from the front neckline in that it will probably want to square for more than just the 1/4 inch that the front squares. It's a straighter neckline, and what you want to do is follow the dots as far as they look straight with your ruler. When the dots start to curve off, that's the time that you will use the curve. Now, the straight part of the curve will go towards the straight part of the back neckline, and the curvy part goes up towards the shoulder neckline intersection. And we'll draw in a nicely shaped back neckline. The back neckline is not usually dropped, so that at this point we can add the 1/2 inch of seam allowance, measured carefully, and trim away the excess muslin. Neckline is complete. Next step is the truing of the princess line seam. I'm going to remove the pinch pin to do that because I think the muslin trues best if it's perfectly flat. Using the hip curve ruler, you may find on the back that you can true the entire line in one completed line. You may not have to move the ruler, but it is important that you stay with your dots as carefully as you can. Again, as with the front, we're concerned with a nice continuous flowing line. If 1 dot or 2 dots do not conform, we won't worry about those as long as it makes for a good line. And this particular muslin looks as if it will go almost all the way down without having to be moved, which makes for a very pretty, well-blended line. Okay. It will also take 1/2 inch of seam allowance. As for the front, it is a style line, and a style line normally does not take any adjustment, and therefore 1/2 inch of seam allowance is sufficient. We'll trim away the excess muslin. That leaves just the waistline and the shoulder seam. And as with the front, since it's just 1/2 of a shoulder seam, we will not true it until the side panel has been draped, and the same applies to the waistline. The muslin then will go back on the form, trying as closely as possible to get it back exactly the way it was draped. Center back is pinned at neckline, shoulder blade, waistline, and halfway between. Waistline is pinned in the center of the tape. The pinch of ease will go back in, straddling the front shoulder seam. Make sure your dots are back to hitting the front shoulder line. We'll anchor the princess line in the seam allowance. So that when we drape the side panel over, it will not shift and we'll get a good true line. Now, having completed 3 panels, we are faced with the last panel, which is the side piece. The side piece is the last and most difficult panel. It must balance in 2 places. It will be perfectly straight across the shoulder blade level. It will also have to balance at the side seam as for the first basic. It is a balanced side seam, and it's the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle and can be difficult. It's important to place the last panel so that 2 very important things are happening. 1, the cross grain line continues to be perfectly straight across. 2, that the lengthwise grain is placed in such a way that it falls exactly the way the guideline did on the first basic. The guideline on the first basic was measured 1 1/4 of an inch back from the ridge area plus 1/4 inch for ease. That means that in placing this, we're going to plan for at least 1 1/4 inches from the lengthwise guideline over to the plate. Now, that can be done flat on the table, or it can be done by feeling for the place on the form. If it makes you feel more secure, you can measure out that 1 1/4 inches and place the muslin that way. It can, however, be done directly on the form. I'm going to place the muslin so that it ever so slightly passes by the plate, about 1/8 of an inch. The cross grain line is now perfectly straight across, and I'm going to pin the muslin at the princess line shoulder blade intersection and hold the muslin perfectly straight across past the plate slightly. and then move that cross mark, that is the plate mark, back onto the ridge, thus forming the ease that normally appears across the back. The ease is the same ease that was on the basic muslin. It is important for the movement and comfort of the sleeve, and it should be there. Having placed it, I'm then going to distribute that fullness across this small area. It's terribly important that this pin that was holding the cross grain line to the princess line of the first panel is not removed, because if it is removed, all of the ease will disappear. So that pin must stay in place, and the rest of the fullness should be distributed. In addition, of course, you want to look at the line and make sure that it is perfectly straight across and that you're getting the kind of boxy effect when you hold it straight that we had with the basic muslin. If the muslin is perfectly straight, it will box around the figure in a box shape look, and both the cross grain line and the lengthwise grain line will then be perfectly straight. We're going to bring that lengthwise grain straight down to the waistline, trying very hard not to shift it right or left, and pin it at the waistline with a pinch of ease. We didn't have a pinch of ease on the first panel, but we do need it on the second panel. Slash the guideline and secure the guideline so that when we move to the side seam, the guideline will not be pulled out of shape. And basically we're looking for the same kind of fit that we did on the first muslin with the shoulder dart and waistline dart, namely a balanced side seam. I'm going to bring the front muslin to the back muslin at the armhole plate cross mark, the one that was the tight body line, and pin it, and then pin it at the waistline, and check to see if the side seam is in balance. It is in balance if the distance between the front and the back pieces is exactly the same, and the edge of the muslin is falling on one grain line. Whether or not they meet out at the outside edge is immaterial, since every thread is a grain line, and if they meet perfectly, they will be in balance. Once that has been established, once the side seam and the balance has been established, we can move over to the princess line waistline intersection, and again you may need to slash it a few more times to make it lay flat. That's perfectly all right, and we'll smooth over the princess line of the center panel, and there will be a little bit of ease forming in the shoulder blade area. That is part of the shaping of the back. The back, after all, is not perfectly straight. It does have some shaping to it, and there will be some ease forming, and that's all right. In going to the top of the muslin, we have to keep in mind the same rules that we kept for the basic muslin, namely that the grain line will continue straight up. It doesn't shift right or left. It should continue straight up over the shoulder seam. And it will also need a pinch of ease straddling the shoulder, as for the first panel, and will be pinned down with the grain line, laying down flat over the figure just the way it is, in the direction it is going. Don't shift it right or left, just let it go straight up over the shoulder, and it will tend to go in towards the princess line of the center back panel. We'll put one or two more pins in preparation for marking to keep the muslin from shifting, and then mark the side panel. I'm going to begin at the princess line, cross marking, and dot the princess line following the princess line of the side center back panel, cross marking at the shoulder blade line, and continue dotting all the way down. At the waistline, a cross mark right over the cross mark of the center panel, one dot halfway between the princess line and the guide line, one dot halfway between the guide line and the side seam pin. There will be absolutely no markings along the side seam. There is no need to crease the plate on the back. The next marks will be for the shoulder, which is dotted, cross-marked at the shoulder ridge intersection, and 2 dots on the ridge. 1, 2, and that's all that's needed. The muslin now can be removed from the form for truing. Now, taking this muslin off requires a little time. The muslin is pinned down in many places. It's important to remove all of the holding pins, but very important not to remove the pins that are holding the side panel and of the back and the side panel of the front together. Now you have to remember that the back shoulder seam, princess line seam, is anchored, and those pins should be removed before taking the muslin off. The front shoulder seam is anchored, and those need to be removed carefully. And the side of the muslin in the front is anchored. So all the pins should be removed before pulling the muslin. It will stretch out of shape if you don't remove those pins. Okay, as with all muslins, the important part to begin with is the separating of the muslin. You never true the back muslin while it is pinned to the front, so it must first be separated, and for that purpose we're going to trace off the tight body line, the extended line onto the back. However, most important, more important than any of those lines, are the cross marks, because without the cross marks you will not know where the line should be pinned, and it will do you no good to have traced 2 lines without the cross marks. Because they're so important, we'll begin with the cross marks. The lowered extended cross mark first, the waistline cross mark second, and then the tight body line, and the extended line. And while they are pinned together and are in perfect balance, we'll draw in a 1-inch seam allowance and trim the back and the front at the same time. Having done that, you may remove the front, put it aside, and we're ready to deal with the back side panel. We'll begin with princess line. Now, again, it may or may not conform exactly to the ruler. You're looking for a good blend of line. However, it is more important that you stay more precisely with this line than with the first one, because this one will have to be pinned perfectly to the line on the center panel. And Again, you may be able to do it all in one line, or you may have to shift the ruler several times, depending upon the shape of the line. At the shoulder blade area, if necessary, if it forms any kind of a point, you can blend that in so that you get a nice, gentle curve in the shoulder blade area. It will take 1/2 inch of seam allowance, as for the front and the center back panels. And trim. We can complete the back armhole. For the back armhole, the method is exactly the same as for the basic armhole. From the shoulder blade line, we will drop a straight grain down from the plate cross mark about 1 inch or 1.25 inches. Little guideline. The guideline is not part of the armhole, but it is a barrier to keep you from going inside of it and thereby gouging out the armhole so that the sleeve will be too tight. It acts as a protection against doing that. We will stay outside the line and draw in a rather shallow curve, coming a little bit away from the line, but a slightly shallower curve than we did for the front. The curve will then be flipped over and we'll follow the dots up to shoulder seam ridge intersection. This armhole as well will be loosely trimmed, leaving a good 1.5 inches of seam allowance. In case any adjustment is needed, we'll check that back on the form. I'm now going to need to pin the bodice side seam and the side panel and the center panel together. As for the front, I'm going to slash at the shoulder blade level to make the turning under of the seam allowance easier. And I'm going to measure about 2 inches down on the shoulder blade, from the shoulder blade line towards the waistline, and place a cross mark. And measure about 2 inches up above the shoulder blade line and place a cross mark. That's the area where the ease of the back will fall. Now, in pinning it together, I'm going to turn under the seam allowance of the center back panel very gently. Don't want it to stretch. And match up the shoulder princess line intersection and pin up to the cross mark. At the same time, transferring the cross mark to the side panel. And then begin at the waistline and pin the waistline cross marks together and match up princess lines of each panel and pin up to the cross mark that was below the shoulder blade line. The reason for that is that the ease forms on the side panel, and we want to control it right in that area. We'll cross mark onto the side panel from the center panel, and then take the muslin in hand and match up the shoulder blade line, and you'll see that an amount of ease will be forming between the shoulder blade and the cross mark below, and we'll just control that. And these will be forming above, and we'll just put a pin to control that. That puts the body shape into the back, and you can see it, that there is a shaping of the back. We can then move on to the shoulder seam. For the shoulder seam, we can use the hip curve ruler and draw the shoulder seam in from neckline to ridge, following the dots again as closely as possible. The curvier part of the ruler tends to go up to the neckline, and the straighter part goes out towards the ridge. It's a very, very gentle curve. It will take 1 inch of seam allowance because it's a shoulder seam, and sometimes you have to make adjustments on shoulder seams. Having completed the pinning of the back, we're ready to put the front and back bodice together. As with the basic bodice, it doesn't matter whether you pin the back over the front or the front over the back. What is very important is that when you pin, that you fold the muslin on the correct line. You want to fold back on the extended line, very gently and not stretching. We're going to match up the armhole lines, front and back, and the waistline cross marks, front and back. And then fill in the rest of the seam with pins. It's important at this point that you look at the muslin and see a line extending on either side of the seam line. If you can't see the two lines, then you're pinning the wrong lines together. The ovaries that's formed in this area by the extended lines is very important to the fit and comfort of the garment. Having pinned the side seams together, we may now go to the waistline. You'll remember that we said when we draped the center front panel that the grain line would be perfectly straight from princess line to center front, and that's what I'm going to draw, a perfectly straight grain line from the waistline cross mark at the princess seam over to center front, following the grain as carefully as I can. We will draw the back waistline straight as far as it wants to go. It may or may not be on perfectly straight grain, depending upon the shape of the body. This particular muslin seems to be quite straight. As with the basic muslin, we will lower the side seam 1/4 of an inch, and then using the French curve, place the straight part of the curve to the straight part of the waistline at the front, and very gently drop down to the lowered waistline at the side. It's a very gentle drop. Turn the curve over and do the same for the back. A gentle curve from center back panel to side seam, forming a nice continuous waistline. The waistline seam will normally take a 1 inch seam allowance, measured onto the muslin. And then trim away, cutting through all of the seams, through the side seam fullness, all seams, and through the princess line to the center front. Having completed the waistline, we're ready to pin the shoulder seams together. When you put the shoulder seams together, you'll put the back shoulder over the front shoulder. We'll pin at the neckline shoulder intersection and hold the muslin together to see that the back shoulder extends past the front shoulder at least 1/4 inch. That's the pinches of ease and should appear as the back shoulder being longer. Then slide back and pin the armhole ridge area together. Match up the princess lines, and of course they should match perfectly. They should look like one seam going from front to back. A pin in the middle between princess line and neckline, a pin between princess line and armhole, and you should be able to see the little tunnels of ease appearing in between. At this point, we're ready to put the muslin back on the form to check to see if all the lines are true, if the armhole is correct and has enough ease at the back. We'll pin the muslin on exactly the way it was draped. Waistline in place, below the apex, center back neckline intersection, shoulder blade level. Waistline and center of the back. Going to put the pinches of ease back in place. Pin at the lowered waistline. And check to see that all of the lines are falling well. The muslin is in balance. It fits the form well. Shoulder blade level is perfectly straight. And then you're going to look inside the armhole from the front to the back. And you should see the armhole extending past the form. If you can't see that line when you look inside from the front, that means that your armhole is probably gouged out, and if you put a sleeve into the garment, it will probably tear out. If you find that that is not working, that you cannot see it, then you know that you must correct your armhole and give it a little bit more room at the back. If you find it is correct, you can remove the muslin from the form and measure the seam allowance on the armhole to 1/2 inch, evenly all around, and trim away the excess muslin. It is easier to pin a sleeve into a garment where the seam allowance is 1/2 inch and makes for a better sleeve. Trim away the excess muslin. And put the muslin back on the figure for a final check and to look and see what we have accomplished. all of the things you learned about the basic muslin are in effect on the princess line bodice. The side seam is in balance. The shoulder blade level is straight. And for all intents and purposes, the fit is equal to the fit of a basic bodice. And it's completed.